What is up, ladies and gents? This is George Bean, and today is my review for the 2014 Marvel superhero film Captain America: The Winter Soldier, which was the second chapter in the Captain America trilogy and the 9th overall in the still-growing Marvel Cinematic Universe. The film was directed by Anthony and Joe Russo, and written by Christopher Marcus and Stephen McFeely, the writers of the first film, The First Avenger, and was produced by Marvel Studios CEO Kevin Feige, and once again stars Chris Evans as the titular superhero. Upon its release on the 20th of April 2014, the film had received unanimous praise from critics, audiences, and fans alike, and had gone on to gross over $700 million worldwide, effectively outgrossing its predecessor, The First Avenger. At the time of its theatrical release, The Winter Soldier was considered to be a big game changer for the MCU, as it had took everyone by surprise, I myself, with what it had presented to them. The plot? Set 2 years after the Battle of New York in The Avengers, Steve Rogers continues to work as Captain America for the intelligence agency S.H.I.E.L.D., while also struggling to find his place in the 21st century after being frozen for 70 years. But along the way, S.H.I.E.L.D. director Nick Fury falls under attack by a mysterious assassin known as the Winter Soldier. Then finding himself a fugitive from S.H.I.E.L.D., Steve teams up with a fellow Avenger and S.H.I.E.L.D. agent, Black Widow, to uncover what is eventually revealed to be a massive conspiracy within S.H.I.E.L.D. that could change the course of history. After they had finished The First Avenger, and it was just close to being released to theaters, writers McFeely and Marcus immediately shifted focus on developing a storyline for the sequel. They had wanted the sequel to feel different from the first film, so they had eventually settled on the conspiracy thriller genre. Thus, whilst the first Avenger feels much like a 40s World War II movie in the mold of Raiders of the Lost Ark, its sequel feels much more like a 70s political thriller in the mold of such similar films as 3 Days of the Condor and The Parallax View. And that latter fact is true, that McFeely and Marcus had actually looked to those two films as influences to achieve the type of look and style they were going for on this film. They had mostly used the Robert Redford-led Condor as the much bigger source of inspiration for the script structure, mostly following the idea that the protagonist is being chased by a threat that they, along with the audience, only discover halfway through the film. And as a minor side note, I have done a review for 3 Days of the Condor a couple months ago, and I had brought up how it influenced the Winter Soldier. So yeah, if you love this movie, then I'd recommend watching Condor as well. It's actually a pretty good political thriller from the 1970s with a twist in it that, to me, sounds freakishly prophetic to today's world. To give you an impression of what to expect it to be like, picture Condor as like the Bourne Identity if it were made in the 1970s and starred Robert Redford, who is in this movie, by the way. Now to bring up, this movie was based on the original 2005 Winter Soldier story arc by Ed Brubaker. McFeely and Marcus had also wanted to use the original Winter Soldier arc, and so they managed to take both the Winter Soldier comic and the conspiracy fiction genre and mesh them together into this movie. But while it does take certain elements and basic premise from it, everything else has been largely changed to make it fit into part of the overall Marvel Cinematic Universe, and for the sake of audience engagement. The comic is much more overtly comic book fantastical, but for the movie it was made to be more of a grounded spy thriller that both dismantles S.H.I.E.L.D. and sets up the groundwork for what is to come in the next film, Civil War. But with that said, I can say that they have done a damn good job adapting the comic to film. I remember back in 2012, I think this was like right before the Avengers was just about to come out. After watching the first Avenger the first time, I knew that the sequel was going to be set in modern times, but I had wanted more World War II in it. But when I heard that the Russo brothers were going to direct, my reaction again was like, those guys who directed Yumi and Dupree? Are you nuts? Great, now Captain America is going to be a comedy. But after seeing this film, I can say I was very much shockingly surprised by it. It was such a kick-ass film to watch. I was surprised by the Russos' direction in this film, how they directed the action sequences as well was done very well. Though I am not a fan of shaky cam, I'd say they did it very well. I can still see what the hell is going on in the action in this film. So, thanks guys, the Russos. Have a cookie. What I really love about this film is that, yes, again, whilst the first Avenger is like a World War II movie, this film is more like a political thriller. It really does make the film feel very different from its predecessor, which is a pretty good thing, because when making a franchise, you'd want each sequel to feel different from each other, and not just simple rehashes of what had worked before. A big franchise lesson that the Transformers movies did not learn from. Those movies were very similar to each other structurally. But yeah, I love how this film focuses on Captain America struggling to adapt to the 21st century while also battling a massive corrupt conspiracy within S.H.I.E.L.D. Having him as a fugitive from S.H.I.E.L.D. also kind of gives the film a plausible reason for why none of the other Avengers don't appear in this film to help out Cap and Black Widow. After the first Avenger, I'd honestly wanted to see more of Hydra, the villainous organization Hydra, in future films. I did not believe that it was the last we had ever seen of them. I did not believe that it had died with the Red Skull. But in this movie, I did not expect such a grand return from them in such a massive way. It had absolutely shocked me the first time I had seen this, and as proven, I was not alone in that feeling, as many others people had felt that similar shock from seeing this. I mean, I knew that Toby Jones was returning as Dr. Arnim Zola in this film, but not like this. I was expecting them to be featured in flashbacks or something. Not in the way the movie has it as. What I loved is how Hydra has evolved from its Nazi roots and have learned to blend into society, now uttering the Hail Hydra phrase into each other's ears. It certainly shows how things have changed in the past 70 years whilst Cap was frozen in the ice. In his time, in the 1940s, everything was more black and white in the world. But now he is living in the 21st century, where everything is much more in the gray area, the post 9/11 times, a time where anything that seems out of the ordinary is called a conspiracy. We are now living in a time where global surveillance is an everyday thing, and something that is considered to be controversial, as proven when former NSA contractor Edward Snowden had leaked classified NSA documents revealing such governmental surveillance programs as PRISM and the Five Eyes program, having direct access to our accounts on websites such as Google and Yahoo. I mean, I've noticed that many movies back in the early 2010s had tried to convey a sense of allegory of the post 9/11 world onto themselves. Sometimes they worked, other times they fail at translating well. Like, for example, Star Trek Into Darkness had also tried to bring up questions about drone strikes and targeted killings, but it ends up getting muddled in the space action by its second half. But even in that film's ending, it tried to pull a 9/11 moment where the villain tries to crash a giant spaceship into a hugely populated city on Earth, which it ends up toppling down multiple skyscrapers, which is a bit much, but still. Even Iron Man 3 had brought up the idea of manufacturing a terrorist. And on a side note, I actually rather enjoy Iron Man 3, and I find it to be more rewatchable than Iron Man 2, thank you very much. But to say, like Into Darkness, Winter Soldier brings up the questions about the policies of drone warfare and targeted killings, except in this film it's done much more subtly. It's not in-your-face obvious. What I love is that in the film, S.H.I.E.L.D. is initiating a massive surveillance program called Project Insight, in which 3 advanced helicarriers are launched into orbital flight around the globe, linked by satellite and armed with heavy artillery firepower to suppress any and all growing terrorist threats. You can obviously tell that the helicarriers are allegorizing... Is that a word? Allegorizing? Anyway, allegorizing our unmanned drones and the questions that have been brought up in our policies and using them. And it's also bringing up the question of the Patriot Act, which had put most of our civil liberties into question and allowing the government to do things they otherwise couldn't have done before the act. I mean, the whole freedom versus security issue that dates back to literally the Nazi times in World War II. There's an old quote from Benjamin Franklin concerning freedom versus security, where he said, "Those who would give up liberty to purchase a little safety deserve neither." And that is a very powerful quote for him to make, as it has now today come up in the context of new technology and concerns about government surveillance. Even YouTube channel Comic Book Cast had brought this up too, even mentioning how the Battle of New York is kind of like the 9/11 moment in the MCU, which actually kind of makes sense, because much like 9/11, the Battle of New York changed everything in the MCU, and there being increasing military funding and domestic security. They also brought up how the critics compared this movie, the Winter Soldier, to The Dark Knight. They say that this movie is like Marvel's answer to The Dark Knight, which makes sense too, except the difference between the two films is that Batman voluntarily advocates spying on citizens, while Captain America fiercely opposes it. Because as shown, invasive spying could be used as a weapon for the enemy, much like in Spectre. But yeah, you can say that this movie can be described as being Marvel's spiritual successor to The Dark Knight. But yes, I hope that I went on a rant about that, but I hope that everything I had said sounded about right. In short summary, The Winter Soldier is a superhero film that perfectly translates political allegory onto itself. I mean it. It does the allegory perfectly well. It managed to do what every other movie had tried to do in reflecting the world we live in today. But also, yeah, again, to bring up the Hail Hydra bit in this movie, try that. If you have friends, family, anybody, go up, give them a hug, and whisper Hail Hydra into their ears. The faces you will get will be priceless. Seriously, go do it. It's brilliant. Now for the cast, Chris Evans was amazingly stellar as Captain America. Very likable and sympathetic for us to root for him throughout the film. In this film, it shows that Cap is going up against an overwhelming enemy, which builds up suspense in the film. As said, I believe that Chris Evans will be remembered as Cap America, much like how Christopher Reeve has been remembered as Superman for the past 40 years. I love that one scene where Cap escapes from the S.H.I.E.L.D. headquarters. The scene where Cap fights all those corrupt S.H.I.E.L.D. agents in the elevator was spectacularly done. And the scene after where Cap takes down a shield Quinjet was fucking awesome. I love how Cap takes the jet down using his wits, agility, and frisbee shield. And the music score in the bit was great. Very heroic. It was at that moment when Captain America had become my favorite Avenger. Iron Man was my favorite, number one favorite, but yeah. And Scarlett Johansson was great as Natasha Romanoff or Black Widow. I did like how when she and Cap are teaming up, they don't end up falling in love, that romance thing. It's avoided. It's like this movie's trying to be anti-cliche in a way. It was actually a nice, refreshing thing to have the guy and girl teaming up and not fall in love in the end. Here, their relationship is a bit more platonic, but of course, Black Widow gets to have a few awesome fight scenes in this film. I love that one moment in the highway fight scene where she dives out of the way of that car. It's such a kick-ass moment for her. And Anthony Mackie was cool as Sam Wilson or Falcon. I love how he and Cap become best friends right away. What's cool about Sam is that even though he knows he's not superhuman like Cap, he still does his best to hold his own in a battle. It was cool having your friends back no matter what. I also love the one scene where he and Frank Grillo's Crossbones are about to fight. Crossbones monologues for a moment, and Sam says, "Man, shut the hell up." Yeah, it's like, stop monologuing, you fuck. And I also love how when they're about to punch each other, it then cuts away. That was so a rocky moment there. It's brilliant. But the best bit is when that fight ends, when a downed helicarrier ends up crashing into the building they're in. Crossbones is hit by the debris, but Sam keeps on running. It's like, damn, that dude can run. So yeah, Falcon, the most badass friend to Captain America ever. I still love that one bit where he tries to help volunteer to help Cap. Cap says, "You don't have to do this, Sam." But Sam's like, "Dude, Captain America needs my help. There's no better reason for me to get back in." Love that bit. I just smiled. It was like the thinking to myself, Superman needs my help? Fuck yeah, I'll do it. Now, Sebastian Stan was amazing as the Winter Soldier in this movie. The complete change he went through to turn Bucky Barnes into the Winter Soldier was surprisingly impressive. He did an amazing job going through such a radical change like that, turning from a gentlemanly soldier friend to a ruthless elite killer assassin. In that one scene in the climax where the Winter Soldier slaughters that air defense team, it's the bit where he actually kicks that guy into a jet engine, and man, was that fucking brutal. I made that "hoo" look when that had happened, but it was awesome. And one thing I should mention here is that I believe, in my honest opinion, that Sebastian Stan could possibly play Kyle Reese in a new Terminator film. An idea that I have stood by since I first saw Terminator Genesis. To be honest, Jai Courtney was a bad choice for Kyle Reese. Maybe it was the director not doing that good of a job there, but still. So if there was one actor I'd pick to play Kyle Reese now, it's Sebastian Stan. I mean, just look at him in this film, or even Civil War. He almost somewhat looks like Michael Biehn, just from a certain angle. Just put him in that green overcoat and give him a shotgun and have him utter the phrase, "Come with me, you want to live," and I think you could picture him as Reese. After seeing him in these films, I'd say he can pull off playing a character who is immensely emotionally conflicted with himself. So yes, dear Hollywood, Sebastian Stan as Kyle Reese. Do it! And Samuel L. Jackson was awesome, as always, as Nick Fury. But what I like in this film is how we are given a chance to look more into who Nick Fury is, and that sometimes he does not always agree with S.H.I.E.L.D.'s methods. That one scene where Fury is ambushed by Hydra agents disguised as cops was an amazing scene to watch. It was a nice change to have an action scene without Cap involved. I loved Fury's SUV because of that gadgets to it. It was like the Batman utility belt on wheels, including a small turret gun in the center console. And also, this was something I did not hear until a few more viewings, but apparently Fury's SUV can fly too. It's like, what? When the cops are using the ramming cannon on the car to bust out the window, I was actually concerned for Fury, but then Fury busts out the mini turret and starts firing on them. I was like, whoa. It was cool, but the scene is also made all the more funnier if you watch this film with the commentary by Oliver Harper. It's when his friend Duncan Casey goes into a rant over the mini turret. It was hilarious to listen to him, but still, Nick Fury was cool in this. He sure does always make a grand... I will say that he sure as hell does always make a grand entrance every time. Oh, and also, on a side note, seriously, go check out Oliver Harper's commentaries. They're pretty fucking hilarious to listen to, especially when they involve Duncan Casey. Such a funny guy, always bringing up such amazing impersonations by him, and even references The Simpsons. And finally, Robert Redford was pretty good as Secretary Pierce. It was surprising to see him in this movie. I was like, Robert Redford? He's in this movie? I'd have thought he'd be the kind of actor who would view these films as being beneath him. But nope, not for Redford. But it was cool to see him as the true main villain here. But what I also love is it is mentioned that Fury and Pierce were once war buddies, which I like there. It's when Pierce brings up having learned about peace being a false thing. He just simply says, Bogota, and Fury makes a face. I love that moment, when war buddies bring up a war they were in by simply saying the name of the country they were in. But yeah, I do say Secretary Pierce was great as a one-off villain in this film. And one thing I should also mention is that there's that one villainous Hydra agent who works alongside Crossbones. The actor playing him, that's the Russian dude in Batman v Superman, who works for Lex Luthor. He's the guy who threatens to flamethrow Superman's mother, Martha. Why did you say that name? He says, a killer, I swear it. And Batfleck's like, I believe you. But now, with that said, now for the music score, it was composed by Henry Jackman, whose other credits include Kick-Ass, X-Men First Class, and Kingsman. While I was a bit saddened that Alan Silvestri didn't return for this film, I did actually like this film's score. The main theme was a spectacle to listen to. It almost kind of reminded me of the Superman theme. I could listen to the theme all day. It's really good. You can hear it in full view at the end credit sequence, which has an amazing visual scene for the credits, and it's done very well. And to say, this movie does follow the 3-act structure very well. The first act involves showing Steve having to deal with working for S.H.I.E.L.D. and adapt to the modern world he is now living in. The second act has Steve discovering a major corrupt conspiracy within S.H.I.E.L.D. and having to go on the run as a fugitive, and eventually discovering the main shocking truth about S.H.I.E.L.D. and Hydra. And the third act involves Steve and his friends going into a final battle to stop Hydra from using their new surveillance program to conquer the world. I'm sure it sounds odd of me to bring this up, the this mo- but this movie following the 3-act structure, but I feel I needed to point that out. Like, in comparison, the original Star Wars film had also followed the 3-act structure as well. And, in my opinion, even Iron Man 3 had done that too. Just watch these movies with the 3-act structure in mind, and you can see it follows it perfectly well. So, overall, in conclusion, I would need to give Captain America the Winter Soldier a rating of at least 9.5 stars out of 10. Because it is quite possibly, or most definitely, the very best Captain America movie I have ever seen. Possibly the best movie in the MCU. And it is most definitely the very movie that made Captain America an instant fan favorite. Possibly more so than Iron Man. It is the quintessential movie that defines who Captain America is and what he stands for. And as a political thriller, it is a very effectively good one, to say the least, but one that reflects the world we live in today. And the acting performances are great, especially from Chris Evans and Sebastian Stan, with even some standout performances from Anthony Mackie and even Samuel L. Jackson. So in summary, Captain America: The Winter Soldier was, for me, a fucking awesome installment in the MCU franchise. Period. So thank you for watching, ladies and gents. Sorry for the delay. I had just been on a bit of a drinking binge for my very first time, and I have to say, I am not doing that again. The hangover was a miserable experience for me, so nauseating. So that's why it took me long there. But I will be reviewing Captain America: Civil War very soon, so watch out. So thanks for watching, and until then, I will see you all next time. Peace!